Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon. I am your host, Captain Matt, and today we're talking about what your boat salesman won't tell you about new pontoons. The point of this channel is to share information that's going to help you ensure that you have a great boating lifestyle and you start off day number one. Sometimes salespeople can be a little overzealous, can be a little untruthful, can be a little bit just optimistic and not wanting to lose the sale. And they won't tell you everything. That's why you're watching this video. That's why you're searching on YouTube, and there's a bunch of videos out there for you to check out. So let's look at what we're going to talk about in this one. Real story on new pontoon boats, how they're really made. Issues with transport, dealer responsibility, where they come into play in the picture, the most common problems with the boat, with the motor, and the trailer, because there really are three separate components as you look at it, even with the warranty, especially with the warranty. The first 20 hours, and what's your responsibility in the whole thing when it comes to buying a new boat. So, of course, we're brought to you by the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon Toolkit. It's great for new boats and pontoons. You can pick yours up free at boatbuyerssecretweapon.com. We've just updated it for 2021. It is 20 pages of just helpful information, checklists, questions to ask dealers and private sellers, how to determine the best boat loan, best insurance, how to maximize your trade if you've got a trade. You can pick that up. We've also put in the calculator so you can see the real cost of ownership, as well as a couple of videos that are bonus videos that you can't find on the channel that are going to be really helpful for you. And I think you're really going to enjoy those. We just added those recently. So check those out. So let's start with how pontoons are really made. Now, you may think of a boat factory and you may think of this high-tech automated robotics plant like a Toyota or Mercedes or a Honda is built. The reality is pontoons are built very, very, very much by hand. You can see this pontoon facility there's not a whole lot of automation. They're rolling pontoons down on dollies. When it gets to the point where they're putting the deck on them, they're just on a roller and they're just rolling down the line, and they're putting the pieces on very handmade. So what does that mean to you? Well, it means that there can be some mistakes that are made. People make mistakes, and there are sometimes a wire's not connected right. Sometimes a bolt's not tightened all the way down the way it should. And they're also welded by hand. A few manufacturers will have some machine welds, but for the most part, because of the nature of how pontoons are made, most of the welds are going to be done by hand. So what that means is on the pontoon, if there's a bad weld, especially on one of the welds that holds the pontoon together, if it's not a great weld, there can be little pinholes in there that water can get in. Over time, your pontoon will take on water. You may see that some manufacturers put drain plugs in their pontoons. That's because they've had a history of getting water in their pontoons because of bad welds or some other malfunction, and they put those drains in there so it's easier to resolve that issue. Now, some manufacturers don't put a plug in their boat because they say, hey, this is supposed to be watertight, airtight, and we're going to even pressurize it in some situations. So we don't want anything that's going to allow water to get in, and they don't have a plug in there. Same thing. If their welds are bad, they're more likely going to be issues, and that's why some manufacturers will pressure test their tubes to just double check their welds. So it can happen even on a brand new boat, and I've seen it happen. Even some of the best manufacturers I've seen it happen on, and it's something to be aware of. Easy to fix. It's not a major problem to get it fixed, but we'll talk about this a little bit later. If you get your new boat on day one and day three your log starts taking on water, it's very frustrating and very annoying, something that you need to be aware of, and why I'm going to recommend something at the very end of this to be helpful. The next thing that most people won't tell you is most, not all, but most manufacturers get their pontoon furniture from the same handful of pontoon furniture manufacturers. So what that means is that if there is a shortage of product, that can slow down the build process of the boat. If there is a bad batch of fabric or something goes wrong, that manufacturer has a defect, it's likely going to impact multiple builders. Now, some manufacturers will have customized upholstery and stitching that they use that's proprietary to their seats, but the bases, everything is made the same, and of course the manufacturer is trying to be as efficient as possible, so they will reuse as much as they can components, upholstery, hardware, things like that. And so you may have 3 different pontoon manufacturers that have very similar, if not the exact same furniture. Typically, you're not going to be able to really notice it, but when you start looking, you can start seeing some things that are duplicated over and over and over. And what you want to do is you want to inspect for the quality and the hinges and the feel of the fabric, because they make a cheap version, a middle version, and a expensive version. And then, like I said, they may oftentimes customize the upholstery that's on them. Transport. This is an area that really can bite people in the butt when it comes to their pontoons. They get very excited and their boat comes in, and because of the way that pontoon boats are manufactured, they're loaded on the truck either with a hoist, with a lift of some kind, or a forklift. Now, the problem comes in is that the forklift operator has to be very, very precise in loading it. You can see how they're loading it on the racks. There's not much clearance between that bottom pontoon and the top pontoon. They're going to run down the road just like that. Everything is winched down and strapped down, and 95%, 99% of them get to the dealer no issues. But if you're shipping out of Indiana and you're shipping it to New York, or you're shipping it to New Mexico, you're shipping it to Nebraska, wherever it's going, it's got a long road on the interstate, and things can happen. So it's happened that pontoons are damaged in transit. So they leave the factory, they get their quality inspection, everything looks great, welds are pressurized, everything is good. But on that transport, either loading it or unloading it at the dealer, and different dealers have different ways of unloading. Some of them have they pulls right under the hoist, and they've got their hoist that they hook it up, and they can take these off very easily. Others use a forklift that's big and heavy duty with an operator that's very experienced, and they've got it all prepped up so it limits the chance of puncturing or denting or causing a problem. Others have to rent a lift for it. What's that thing called? My mind just went blank there. One of those a crane. There we go. A crane to get them off. Others will have a very inexperienced forklift operator that is jumping on and helping out, and damage can happen. So it's, again, we'll talk about what you need to do to eliminate that. And again, most of the time they arrive safely, but if you look at it's somewhat of a precarious process loading and unloading these pontoons, and it doesn't take a whole lot to dent that aluminum pontoon or even cause a puncture. The other thing that happens is there's components that don't take well to stacking, like the bimini top. You can see kind of in that top pontoon in the front, you can see the bimini top is strapped on. In the back bottom third, you can see, or the bottom half, you can see the other bimini tops are stashed in there. So again, those components are not affixed at the factory, and sometimes that can cause some issues. So when the boat gets to the factory, it's going to look something like this. Sometimes it may not actually, if you look at these coming from the factory, if you notice, in addition to the bimini tops being off, they also don't have motors on them. Sometimes the manufacturer will rig and mount the motor. Other times, the dealer will say, no, we are going to rig and mount the motor, and that gives us the flexibility on this boat. If somebody wants it with a 50, we can hang a 50. If they want it with a 90 or a 115, we can hang a 90 or a 115. If you get it from the factory, you typically, well, you have to choose the motor that you want hung, and it can be more difficult to customize a boat. On the other hand, at the factory, that person that's hanging the motors, that team that's hanging the motors, hangs 10, 15, 20 motors a day, whatever the number is, I don't even know, but they are very good, and they know exactly how to do it, exactly what hole to mount it on, and they are much more efficient and experienced at it. So when the pontoon gets to the dealership, the dealer doesn't just unload it, unwrap it, and it's ready to hit the water. It may have to be rigged with the motor. Now, all of the wiring and the harnesses are all back there, and it's pre-rigged, so it's a pretty easy process. All they have to do is hang it, put it on the right setting as far as how high or low that they mount it, fill it with fuel, fill it with oil, put the battery in, hook up the steering and make the adjustments on the steering, put in the steering fluid if it has hydraulic steering, get that all ready, put the bimini top on, maybe, depending on what other options, there may be a few other things that they have to do. And so the dealer is responsible for doing that. In addition, the good dealers are also inspecting the boat and going through it and saying, hey, we know that these boats are very much made by hand, and there are times when nuts don't get tightened down, screws may be loose, there's somebody scratched something and it didn't get caught, it got scratched or dented, or some issue popped up in the transport, and they're going to go through and they're going to address as many issues as possible. Some of them will even go so far as to put it on the water and go run it for 15, 20 minutes and make sure that they shake it down just a little bit. That shakedown period is a term we'll talk about shortly, but they'll shake it down a little bit to see if something comes loose, if something doesn't feel right, go through all the systems, turn on the stereo, check the gauges, check the throttle setting, check the steering setting, all of that type of thing, and they'll address it before it ever gets delivered to you. Now, on the negative side, there are some dealers, most dealers, if you watch my videos, I'm a big believer in a good relationship and picking a good dealer. Unfortunately, some dealers just say, hey, let's get this off the lot. We got it sold. We got the money. Let's get them gone, and we'll deal with it later if they even notice it. And they will do what they need to do, hang the motor. Maybe it's not an experienced person with that boat, and they don't know what hole to hang the motor on, and they just get it out the door, and then you take delivery of your brand new pontoon, and you're finding the things that the dealer should have found. So what I recommend is that you are the one that addresses those issues, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So that's the boat. The motor, there's not much you can do until you take it out of the water and see how everything's going. But the trailer is another piece that you need to be aware of. It's a totally separate component. In most cases, they're ordering the trailer from a trailer manufacturer, and it's not coming packaged with a trailer from the pontoon manufacturer. So whoever their local trailer provider provides the trailer, which means that at times the trailer's not set up exactly right. Typically, if they have a good relationship with their trailer manufacturer, the manufacturer will know that it's for a 23-foot, whatever the model is, and we know how to set the bunks up appropriately. It's typically that center bunk that causes the issue. Maybe it's an 8-foot beam instead of an 8.5-foot beam, whatever the situation is. So you'll want to make sure that not only do you look at the boat, but you also check the trailer, make sure that everything's tightened down, make sure that everything's set up right, make sure that it sits properly, make sure that you hook it up to your tow vehicle, and make sure that the load is right, that you have the right tongue weight, that your axles are level, and that the boat is riding as safely as possible on that trailer. And that's something that the good dealers will check all that for you before you head out. But not all dealers do that, or maybe they just get in a hurry. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're super busy and they just didn't get around to it, and they didn't want to hold you up from getting on the water. Maybe you're in a hurry and you're all excited to get on the water, and you say, oh, we're fine. We just want to hook up and go, and we want to get on the water. Slow it down a little bit, and you'll be much happier if you take that extra 20 minutes and catch some issues than if you leave that 20 minutes earlier and have the issue. So what happens is most people, when they get their new boats, and I've seen this over and over and over. They hop on their boats and they just want to go. They want to just get on and go, and they're excited. It's the most exciting day of a boater's life when you get that new boat. I'm going to encourage you to slow down and don't just hop in that boat and go ripping down. The first thing is you can't go ripping in your new boat. There's a break-in period for almost all outboards, and even if they don't recommend it, I think Evinrude, that is no longer making the engine, said, hey, just we're so good on everything, just get out and go. There's no break-in period really. But Yamaha, Mercury, Honda, they're all going to have a 20-hour break-in period where you need to get on the boat and you need to run it and kind of shake the boat down and break that engine in. The shakedown is really just getting that boat on the water, hitting some wakes, jostling it around, kind of seeing what comes loose, what needs to be tightened. Again, very much made by hand, so that can happen on the first couple outings, and that's why brand new boat owners can get really, really frustrated as a wire will come loose, the stereo will stop working, the speedometer will get clogged, and they just, it drives them crazy because nobody told them to expect this stuff. But I want you to know that you're going to have to break in that engine, which means running it at certain RPM ranges for 2 hours, and then you hit, there's a 5 hour, 10 hour, and 20 hour. You don't just want to get out there, go wide open throttle right off the bat, and run it wide open for the first 20 minutes and just haul ass. You want to ease that engine in. You want to get that oil all through that brand new motor, and that's going to help you have a strong motor and a reliable engine as long as you take care of it and follow the other maintenance guidelines. So find out exactly what that break-in period looks like. If the dealer doesn't tell you, go to the engine manufacturer, go to your manual, and it'll tell you exactly what to do. The other reason why good dealers will put the boat on the water and they'll run it for you a while is because things will come loose. Something won't be tightened the way it should. A wire will come undone, or maybe wasn't plugged in properly at all. All of those things can happen, and it typically is going to happen in the first handful of hours on a new boat because it just takes some time for it to kind of shake down, is the term, and come loose, and then you just tighten up. Typically, it's not major issues, but there are issues, and they can be very frustrating if you're not aware of them. And that's why I want you to know about them. So here's what I recommend because of all that, because the boat is made by one manufacturer, the motor is made by another manufacturer, maybe hung on the boat by the boat builder, maybe hung on the boat by the dealer, depends. The trailer's made by a different company. So here's what I'm going to recommend is inspect everything on your boat before you sign your paperwork and before you leave your dealership. So that means if you're doing it on the water, go and run that boat for 15 minutes or so and do just a little shakedown. Go through every system on that boat. If it's a fishing, turn on the live wells. Those are notorious for having issues where something didn't get hooked up right, or there's something leaking, a pump's not working properly. Turn the stereo on, test the Bluetooth, go through all of the systems, turn every switch, turn every light, look at every gauge, check it while it's going, go a little bit of wide open throttle and test that engine. Again, you still need to do that break-in period, so just do that for a couple of seconds and just test it. Do some turns, check that steering, all of those things. Inspect the welds, inspect the trailer, check the oil. All of those things, I've heard stories from customers, and you see it on Facebook all the time. The dealer forgot to put oil in, or there was, they had the wrong prop on it, or they hung the engine in the wrong hole, which is the height that the engine sits on the back of the boat. There's 4 holes, and each engine and boat configuration will have a hole that it runs best at. Typically, dealers are real good, manufacturers are real good, know this, but at times they just make a mistake and it can happen. It's got the wrong prop on it. There's a number of things that can happen, but if you go out and you run the boat on the water first, if you inspect everything, go through every switch, open every compartment, open every storage area, flipped in every seat, sit in every seat. And if you do that before you sign the paperwork and before you leave the dealership, what you can do is, some of it might be as simple as, oh, we can switch that out right now for you. We can tighten that up. We can adjust that. The steering wasn't quite right. We can do that right now. Whatever it is. If they can't do it right then and there, then make your decision. Do I want to do the paperwork and pay for this boat now and just get them to commit to fixing it? Which most dealers, that's a perfectly good way to do it. If you've got some hesitation, if it's a major issue, maybe the pontoon's taking on water and you see it sitting in the water and now it's kind of getting a little tippy to one side or listing to one side. Well, maybe that's something that you want to say, you get that fixed. I'm going to hold off, even though I'm super excited to get on the water. I'm going to hold off until that's addressed, and then I'll buy it. If you're going to do the first one and say, I'm going to sign everything, but I need you to guarantee to get this fixed, have them write it on the purchase agreement, on the contract, get their signature, commitment for how it's going to be repaired, who's going to pay for it, how long it's going to take, and what's going to be the repercussions if they miss those deadlines. It can happen. I've heard of people, especially right now during this COVID stuff, where parts are difficult to come by because all the manufacturers were shut down, not just the boat manufacturers, but the engine manufacturers, the parts manufacturers, the OEM, parts are incredibly difficult to get in some places. Get that commitment, get it in writing just to be safe. Okay. So that's good. That's the biggest thing to learn from this is it's not, oh my gosh, I never want to buy a new boat. That's not at all what I'm saying. New boats are awesome. You've got the warranty. You've got the great relationship. If you did a good job selecting the dealer, selecting the right boat, if you have done your due diligence in the shakedown and the demo or sea trial, whatever you want to call it, the test drive, all of those things, if you've done your job, you're going to be really happy. If you follow what I taught you here, you're gonna leave that dealership and you're gonna have a great experience. And most of the time it works out well. Every now and again, there can be issues come up again because they're handmade, because you're dealing with a boat manufacturer, an engine manufacturer, and a trailer manufacturer, and a dealer that's also doing some piece of the process. It's important to inspect that. It's important to slow it down a little bit. Don't get so excited and just rush out. Don't let the dealer rush you because they're busy. Take your time and you'll be really happy. Grab that toolkit. You'll be glad you did it. And remember, we also have the how to get the best price on the boat for new boats. It's a must to have this. You're going to save some money. YouTube's recommended you some videos. Subscribe. And I would love to hear if you've had an issue on a new boat, kind of some stories that you could share, real life experience, and what you think you could have done different to avoid it. I would love to see those comments, and we'll talk to you in the next video. Take care, everybody.